Hello friends, welcome back to a new chapter in this course. The chapter we are taking today is the chapter of interests, and as you can see in what we have already done with respect to percentages, I basically believe that the chapter of interest is nothing but an application of the percentage chapter. So just like we have seen in the last chapter, profit and loss, which was also nothing but an application of the percentage chapter and what you learn in percentages. Similarly, interest is also an application of percentages, right? And when you are doing your thinking around interests, the concept of percentage will be an integral part of everything you do here, right? And of course, you understand, and I guess all of us know that when you talk about interest, there are two kinds of problems on interest. One is simple interest problems, and the other is compound interest. Simple interest and compound interest are the two subparts of the interest chapter, and the basic difference between simple interest and compound interest is the compounding factor that is often talked about in all economics and all finance, where in compound interest you get interest on the capital invested as well as interest on the interest, whereas in simple interest you only get your interest on the capital invested. That means you are not given any interest beyond what you get on the capital invested. And this difference will be very clear to you from a very simple situation example. And that example is that suppose I talk about investing rupees 100 at 10% per annum simple interest. Rupees 100 is invested at 10% per annum simple interest. So 10% of 100 we know is rupees 10. So your interest in the first year would be 10. The interest in the second year would also be 10. The interest in the third year would also be 10, because the interest will be constant, right? And essentially your amount, and these are some certain terminologies that you need to understand. The amount you have invested is called as the principal. This is the principal amount. The interest of every year is the yearly interest. And the amount is defined as the principal plus the interest that you have earned. So if I look at this example, if I add one more aspect to this, that the simple interest at 10% per annum is being calculated for 3 years, so I can see that 10, 10 and 10 would be the interest for every year, and hence my total amount is very clearly 130. And this situation in this formula is represented with 130 is equal to 100 plus 30. So a couple of things you need to notice here. first of all the formulas. Let's get the formulas out of the way. But before we get there, let's understand what is the difference between this and compound interest. So in compound interest, what happens is that if you invest 100 rupees at 10% per annum compound interest for 3 years, your first year interest would be 10, so your amount will become 110. Your second year interest will again be 10%, and notice the use of the PCG to calculate this. So 110 will become 121 after 2 years. This is your amount at the end of 2 years. This was your amount at the end of 1 year. And if you want to get the amount after 3 years, you again have to increase this by 10%, and that will be an increase of 12.1, which means 133.1 will be the amount after 3 years on an investment of 100 rupees, on a principal of 100 rupees at 10% per annum compound interest. So as you can see, the difference between compound interest and simple interest starts off from the second year, not in the first year, because in the first year the compound interest is also the same as the simple interest. The difference starts off from the second year, because in the second year you start receiving interest on the interest earned in the first year. In the first year, before the second year starts, in the first year, both in simple interest and compound interest, you are using the same 10% growth in this case. So whatever you get as compound interest is the same as what you get as simple interest, but the moment you go into the compound interest structure from the second year onwards, if you remember, the simple interest structure was plus 10 again. Here you can see it's plus 11, and in simple interest third year was again plus 10. Here you can see it's plus 12.1. So 3 years simple interest would end up at 130 from 100 at 10% per annum, and compound interest ends up at 133.1. So this is the basic difference between simple interest and compound interest. But since our focus in this lesson is on simple interest, so let's just go back to the formulas of simple interest and do a few come out with a few realizations about the simple interest chapter. So the formulas, the basic formula that is there in simple interest is that the interest earned is given as P into R into T upon 100, which basically means that if you have a principal a rate of interest and T being the number of time periods that you know, P being the principal, R being the rate of interest, T being the number of time periods that you know, then the interest earned is given by this formula. So if I talk about a situation where you are investing rupees 100 at 10% per annum for 3 years, P is 100, R is 10, and T is 3. So if you put that in this formula, you will be able to see the interest as 100 into 0.1 into 3 divided by 100 sorry, 0.1 has already happened because we should use this as 10 here, R is 10. So this will be 0.1, you don't need to divide by 100 again. So the value that you will get would essentially end up as 10 into 3, which is 30. But although this does give you the interest, I would suggest a much simpler way of thinking about this, and where you can actually get rid of this formula and you really do not need any formulas for the simple interest chapter, simply because if I give you a situation where you are investing rupees 80, let's take a new example. If I give you a situation where you're investing rupees 80 for 5 years at 8% per annum. Now, instead of going to the PRT formula, you can simply think about this way inside your mind. It's a single point thought rather than going into the formula and writing all those numbers and multiplying and dividing. You can simply think that on rupees 80, 8% will mean 6.4, right? And this is the annual interest that you're getting. Thinking straight like we have thought, or we have learned to think in percentages. So on rupees 80, 8% per annum gives you 6.4 in the first year. And in simple interest, because the second year's interest and the third year's interest and the fourth year's interest, for every time period the interest is same, you can simply do the interest calculation by 6.4 into 5, which is 32. So 32 rupees will be your interest on rupees 80 for 5 years at 8% per annum. So simply by using or looking at a simple interest question as an application of percentage, you can actually bypass the complete formula structures in this chapter, right? And once you know that my principal was 80 and my interest was 32, my amount being principal plus interest would be 112. We know this, and there's absolutely nothing that you do not know or any variable that remains unknown at the end of this calculation. So let's try to think about, let's say, a situation where you are investing rupees 90 at 6% per half year. At 6% per half year, then after 3.5 years, what will the amount become? So, what will be the amount become? Now, amount is principal plus interest. In this case, since you know the principal is 90, you're interested in finding the interest value, right? And you again have two options to do it. One option is PRT by 100. In this case, P is 90, R is 6, and T for 3.5 years is 7 years, 7 time periods, because interest is given half yearly. So if you just multiply all this, you'll get your answer. So 90 into 0.06 into 7, which is 5.4 into 7, which is 37.8. So this is the formula based thinking in this situation. Instead of that, if I use simple logic, my thinking can start from this point. Rupees 90 giving me 6 monthly interest at 6% per 6 months per half year means 6% of 90. I need to calculate that. 6% of 90 is 5.4, because 1% of 90 is 0.9. 6% of 90 is 5.4. You're already reacting to this with this 5.4. And then after 3.5 years, that means 7 half years. 3.5 years is equivalent to 7 half years. So in 1 half year, if you're getting 5.4 rupees as interest, then 7 half years, 5.4 into 7, you reach the same point while reading the question. And that's a very big improvement on the solution. And hence, I would always encourage you to understand this thinking and work it out that way. right? Calculate the annual interest immediately the moment you get these two informations, and then multiply it by the number of time periods. You're doing the same thing essentially, because ultimately 90 into 0.06 in this problem is also, in this way of solving, is also the same. But the route of solving through this is much longer, because you are trying to think about extracting P, putting it here, extracting R, putting it here, extracting T, putting it here. And in this case, it's a natural reaction to what you read, and you get an answer within 5 to 7 seconds. If your calculations are good, you'll get this answer in 5 to 10 seconds flat. This, on the other hand, you'll take at least 20 to 30 seconds. And in aptitude, since doing things fast is important, my suggestion to you will be to always use this for simple interest. So we'll look at more structures on simple interest and questions in the next lesson. For now, this is me, Arun Sharma, signing off, and great to have you guys on Coding Ninjas. I'll see you again in the next lesson on the other side. Bye-bye.